I mean, in order for us to win the Green New Deal, we have to look at the history of the actual New Deal and what it took to win. So FDR comes in 32 election, 33. He comes into power, 25% unemployment. The conditions were really horrible in this country, and nothing was changing right away. He begins to do a bunch of stuff in the first 100 days, but he doesn't really get to meaningful trade union policy. He doesn't actually formalize and legalize what we call the collective bargaining process until the National Labor Relations Act, which happens in the summer of 1935.
Officially called the National Labor Relations Bill, it provides supervised union elections in industrial plants. It creates a judicial board to weigh disputes between labor and management.
The National Labor Relations Act is now the law of the land. We shall see the dawn of a new era of peace and justice for all in our economic life.
It took massive, unruly, messy, bloody, brutal strikes to win the passage of the National Labor Relations Act in 1935. And that's often just written out of history. It's like airbrushed out. So when we think about the New Deal era, what people talk about are the strikes that began in 1936 and 1937, which was the sit-down strikes, the big Flint strikes in the auto sector. And I keep trying to point out to people, those strikes to me, they mattered a lot. But the strikes that got us to those strikes, the strikes that got to the passage of the Wagner Act, which is the National Relations Act in 1935, were strikes that literally have just been airbrushed out. There were massive strikes in 33 and 34 and the beginning of 35. And those strikes created an untenable crisis that allowed FDR to come in and say, whoa, we got to do something here because they're going to pitchfork the place down. So the strategy to win a Green New Deal, I think, is going to take nothing less than massive strikes. So under capitalism, there is nothing more powerful than workers walking off the job and shutting down production. And in today's economy, in this country, because we have in fact shipped most good jobs to places where there's something like modern slavery. The strikes that have been really profound in 2018 and 2019, we've seen are women-led strikes in what I think of as the mission-driven sectors of the U.S. economy, which is education and healthcare. They need to spread into logistics, which is more male than female at this point, but we are seeing a new wave of strikes happening in this country in two sectors of the economy that are not going to be able to be shipped away. And so the differential level of power that they get to bring, which we're desperate for right now, in terms of strikes, is that they bring their whole community into the strike with them. So while they're not shutting down a factory by pulling a switch, because those factories aren't so much here, they are pulling in a different kind of power source, which is the entire broader community. So they are still capable of creating a crisis that no other social movement can create. When Los Angeles teachers walked out in January and 34,000 workers literally just said there's no school, it meant that something like 600,000 kids had nowhere to go and 180,000 or 250,000 parents had nowhere to put their kids. And a massive crisis broke out in Los Angeles that made the mayor, the governor, and the entire political establishment say we need to settle this strike now. And they settled it in a way that actually won something like a mini Green New Deal, and it was transformative. So in a capitalist system, that's a sort of market-driven system, workers walking off the job is the single most powerful act that we can take. And that's especially true when the Supreme Court is controlled by the right and when the state and federal political and electoral systems are as rigged as they are today, which is just what they were in the 1920s and 30s.